My name is Rashid Farakai, and I'm writing this testimony from a hidden location in France. Today I'm 53 years old, a husband, and a father of 4 beautiful children, 2 boys and 2 girls. But the journey that brought me here is one filled with blood, bullets, and the unmistakable hand of God protecting me when death was certain. I need to take you back to where it all began, to help you understand the weight of what I'm about to share. I was born into one of the most respected Muslim families in Iraq. My lineage wasn't ordinary. We were considered sacred among Muslims because our family descended directly from the 7th Imam, Musa al-Kazim. According to Islamic tradition, this meant my bloodline traced back to the Prophet Muhammad himself. In our community, this wasn't just a title. It was everything. It meant respect, honor, and responsibility. My father was a highly respected sheikh and the leader of one of the largest Muslim clans in our region, the Al-Sahid Almi. Our family enjoyed influence that opened doors others could only dream of. We had financial comfort, social standing, and the kind of reputation that made people lower their voices when they spoke our name. From the time I could walk and talk, my entire life revolved around Islam. I wasn't just taught to follow the religion. I was trained to be an example, a model that others would look at and follow. I observed every Islamic precept with extreme devotion. I prayed 5 times daily without fail. I fasted during Ramadan with complete dedication. I memorized the Quran word for word, reciting it perfectly in Arabic. My family was proud of me. The community respected me. I thought I was on the right path, walking in the footsteps of righteousness. Everything changed in 1987 when I was doing my military service. That year, for the first time in my entire life, I met a Christian. His name was Nadim. I knew Christians existed in Iraq, but I had never actually spoken to one before. My circle of friends, my family, everyone I knew was Muslim. Everything I understood about Christians came only from what I read in the Quran, and according to those teachings, Christians were considered impure infidels, people who had corrupted the true message of God. But when I met Nadim, something didn't match what I had been taught. He was kind. He was upright. He was respectful and honest. This troubled me deeply because according to my beliefs, someone like him was destined for hell simply because he wasn't Muslim. The contradiction bothered me so much that I decided I would do something about it. I would convert him to Islam and save him from his fate. My first step was to ask him for a copy of the Gospel. I wanted to prove what the Quran said was true, that Christians had corrupted the original scriptures. I believed that once I examined the Bible, I would find all the contradictions and changes, and then I could show Nadim the truth and bring him to Islam. But before Nadim handed me the book, he made a request that surprised me. He asked me to read the Quran with genuine attention, really trying to understand every word, not just reciting it from memory. This intrigued me because I already read the Quran every single day. During Ramadan, I recited the entire Quran from beginning to end. But Nadim wasn't asking me to repeat verses I had memorized. He wanted me to actually think about what they meant. His challenge resonated with something deep inside me. I realized that even though I knew the Quran by heart, I had never truly stopped to reflect on the meaning behind the words. I had been reciting without understanding, following without questioning. So I decided to seek help from a respected imam in my community, someone who had known me since I was a young boy and treated me almost like his own son. I explained to him the challenge Nadim had given me. The imam told me something that shocked me. He explained that to truly understand the Quran, I would need to master Arabic in its most profound and complex form. I would need to understand the grammar, the context of each revelation, and the historical circumstances surrounding each verse. Then he said something that almost made me give up completely. He told me that correct interpretation would require reading at least 500 books on the chapters of the Quran. 500 books. The number overwhelmed me. I almost quit right then and there. But something inside me kept pushing me forward, urging me not to give up. I began rereading the Quran, but this time with a completely different goal. I wasn't just reciting. I was seeking to understand. Every question that arose in my mind sent me back to the Imam. And every answer he gave me only raised more questions. As I dove deeper into studying the Quran and the most respected biographies of Muhammad, I began noticing things I had never seen before. Contradictions started appearing. Inconsistencies troubled my heart. I discovered accounts of Muhammad that made me question whether he should truly be seen as the perfect role model I had been taught he was. I found records showing that Muhammad had engaged in acts of violence, including murder and looting. These weren't stories told by his enemies. These were accounts recorded by Muslim scholars themselves in the most trusted Islamic sources. The more I read, the more troubled I became. But what shocked me most, what I found impossible to accept, was discovering that Muhammad had 63 wives. His first wife was 20 years older than him. But his last wife, Aisha, was only 6 years old when he married her. 6 years old. This fact, which was recorded in the most authentic Islamic texts, broke something inside me. I couldn't reconcile this with the idea of a perfect prophet, a man whose life I was supposed to imitate in every way. After days and weeks of reflecting on everything I had discovered, I made a decision that I knew would change my life forever. I left Islam behind. The religion I had been born into, the faith that had defined my identity and my family's honor, I walked away from it all. Some time passed, and I met Nadim again, that same young Christian from the army. He remembered the promise he had made to give me a copy of the gospel. I was honest with him and told him I still wanted it. He agreed to bring it to me the next day. That night, something extraordinary happened that I will never forget as long as I live. I had a dream that was so vivid, so real, that when I woke up I could still feel its presence in the room. In the dream, I was standing before a narrow stream, barely more than a meter wide. The water was clear and flowing gently. On the other side of that stream stood a man whose presence drew me in with an inexplicable power. I felt a deep, overwhelming desire to reach him, to cross the tiny stream and stand beside him. But when I tried to move forward, something impossible happened. I found myself suspended in midair, unable to move in any direction. My feet couldn't touch the ground. I couldn't move forward or backward. I was completely helpless, floating there above the water. Then the man on the other side looked at me with eyes full of compassion and love. He extended his hand toward me and spoke words that would echo in my heart forever. He told me that if I wanted to come to him, I must first eat the bread of life. I woke up that morning with my heart pounding in my chest. The phrase kept repeating in my mind. The bread of life. I had never heard those words before in my entire life. They were completely new to me, completely foreign. I didn't know what they meant or where they came from. Later that same day, Nadim appeared with the gospel as promised. I eagerly took the book from his hands and went to a quiet corner, determined to open it and see what I would find. Without thinking or planning, I simply opened the book to a random page. My eyes fell on chapter 6 of the Gospel of John. And the very first sentence I read made my entire body freeze. It said that Jesus is the bread of life. At that exact moment, I felt something like electricity run through my entire body. Those were the exact words the man in my dream had spoken to me. Word for word. I knew without any doubt, without any question in my mind, that the man in my dream was Jesus Christ himself. And I knew that God was personally inviting me to know the truth, to come to him, to understand who he really was. The presence of Christ wrapped around me in a way I cannot fully explain with words. It was real. It was powerful. It was undeniable. With my heart overflowing with this certainty, I made the decision right there to put my faith in Jesus and believe his words. My life would never be the same. From that moment on, I began searching for a Christian community where I could learn and grow. I knew that most Christians in Iraq lived in Baghdad, so I went there, seeking to attend a church service even if only once. But what I found wasn't the welcome I had hoped for. I was rejected everywhere I tried to enter. People were afraid of me. And honestly, I understood their fear. The Quran contains very clear passages that order the death of anyone who abandons Islam. There are verses that command Muslims to kill apostates, those who leave the faith. And there is also a hadith, a saying attributed to Muhammad, that states anyone who changes their religion must be executed. If the person leaves Islam to become a Christian, the punishment is supposed to be even more severe. The Christians in Baghdad knew this. They knew that accepting me could put their entire community in danger. But my family soon began noticing that something was different about me. My behavior had changed. My attitude was different. My parents started investigating what was going on. One day, they asked my oldest son, who was only 4 years old at the time, some questions. That innocent little boy, not understanding the danger, made the sign of the cross in front of them. That single gesture immediately raised every alarm in their minds. They searched our house from top to bottom and found a gospel I had hidden. The moment they discovered it, everything exploded. Shortly after that, I was arrested and brought before the Muslim authorities in our region. They gathered together and issued a fatwa against me. A fatwa is an official Islamic ruling, and in my case, it was a death sentence. They decreed that I must die for abandoning Islam and embracing Christianity. My father, who had always loved me deeply, tried desperately to intervene. He loved me more than words could express. But his love for me was now in conflict with his religious duty. He did everything in his power to make me abandon my faith in Christ. There were threats. There were attempts to bribe me. There were emotional appeals reminding me of the family honor, the reputation, everything we would lose. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could shake my resolve. Christ had revealed himself to me. I had tasted the truth, and I could never go back. Because I refused to deny Jesus, I ended up being arrested and taken to one of the worst prisons in all of Iraq. I spent 1 year and 4 months of my life in that place. The first 3 months were an absolute nightmare that still haunts me when I close my eyes at night. I was constantly beaten. The guards would come to my cell at random hours, drag me out, and beat me with sticks, with their fists, with whatever they could find. My body was covered in bruises that turned from red to purple to black. Some days I couldn't stand up because of the pain. Other days I couldn't lift my arms because they were so swollen. But the physical beatings weren't the worst part. They tortured me in ways designed to break my spirit, not just my body. They would deprive me of sleep for days, keeping me awake by throwing cold water on me or making loud noises whenever I started to drift off. They would withhold food until I was so weak I could barely think straight. Then they would bring food and tell me I could eat only if I denied Christ. I refused every single time, even when my stomach was screaming in agony. They humiliated me publicly, forcing me to stand in front of other prisoners while they mocked my faith and spat on me. They called me every ugly name they could think of. They told me I had betrayed my family, my heritage, my people. They said I had become unclean, that I was worse than an animal. Some days the emotional pain cut deeper than any physical wound. Yet in the midst of all that horror, there was something that sustained me, something that kept me going when I wanted to give up. I remembered Jesus' words in the gospel, how he warned his followers that we would be persecuted, mistreated, and rejected for his name's sake. He had told us this would happen. And somehow, knowing that my suffering was connected to his suffering gave me strength. I accepted it all with a strange sense of joy, knowing I was being counted worthy to suffer for his name. During my time in that Secret Service prison, I was interrogated repeatedly. The interrogators would bring me into a room and ask me the same 3 questions over and over again, sometimes for hours at a time. They wanted to know what church I attended. They demanded the name of the priest who was guiding me. And they insisted I tell them which Christian had first spoken to me about faith. They wanted names so they could arrest others, so they could destroy the entire Christian network. But by the grace of God, by his strength alone, I never answered any of those questions. Not once. They could beat me. They could starve me. They could torture me in every way imaginable. But they could never make me betray my brothers and sisters in Christ. After 1 year and 4 months in that prison, God miraculously opened the door to my freedom. The circumstances were complex and I still don't fully understand how it all happened. But I walked out of that prison alive, which itself was a miracle. However, my problems were far from over. In Iraq, getting baptized as a Christian was practically impossible, especially for someone from a family like mine. I knew that if I stayed in the country, my own family members would hunt me down. They might try to kill me and cover it up as an accident or a house fire. People did that kind of thing all the time. I had no choice. I had to leave my homeland, the only country I had ever known. I fled to Jordan, hoping to find safety and the chance to be baptized there. On July 22nd in the year 2000, after waiting 13 long years, I was finally baptized. 13 years of waiting, of hiding, of hoping. But when I finally went under that water and came up again, I felt like I had been born completely new. The weight of those years lifted off my shoulders in an instant. Some time after my baptism, I went to the city of Amman to do some shopping, just buying basic necessities for my family. I was walking down a busy street in the middle of the day when suddenly I was approached by several men. As they got closer, my blood ran cold. I recognized them immediately. They were members of my own family. There was my uncle and 4 of my brothers, all together, surrounding me so I couldn't escape. They were polite at first, careful not to attract attention from the crowds around us. They invited me to get into their car, saying they just wanted to talk. But their eyes told a different story. I was in Jordan illegally, without proper documentation or a visa. If I refused and they made a scene, I would be arrested and deported back to Iraq, where I would certainly be killed. I had no choice. With my heart pounding, I got into the car. We drove for about 20 minutes, leaving the city behind. The roads became smaller and less traveled. Finally, we turned off onto a dirt path that led into a deserted valley between 2 mountains. There was no sign of life anywhere. No houses, no people, no one who could help me. We were completely alone. The car stopped and everyone got out. I knew what was coming. My uncle, the oldest and most respected among them, looked at me with cold, emotionless eyes. He told me that my father had given them direct orders. They were to bring me back to Iraq, dead or alive. Those were the exact words. Dead or alive. My uncle then reminded me of everything they had already tried. They had attempted to convince me to return to Islam through reason. They had tried threats. They had imprisoned me. They had tortured me. But now I was baptized, publicly declared as a Christian. I had crossed a line from which, in their minds, there was no return. Standing there in that empty valley with death staring me in the face, I felt an overwhelming peace. I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew my life was completely in God's hands and that nothing else mattered. As I stood before them, I began speaking about Jesus, about faith, about baptism, about the incredible love of God. I shared things I had never encountered in Islam, truths that had set me free. I could see that my words were deeply disturbing them, making them uncomfortable in a way that anger and violence never could. Then my uncle brought up the fatwa that had been issued against me years before. The decree was still active, still valid. He reminded me that according to Islamic law, I deserved to die for leaving the faith. He looked me straight in the eyes and said coldly that if I refused to return with them, he would have to kill me right there. I looked back into his eyes with a firmness that could only come from God himself. I told him that if he wanted to kill me, then he should do it. I wasn't going to deny Christ. I wasn't going to renounce my faith. I would rather die. It was at that precise moment that my uncle pulled out a gun and pointed it directly at my chest. The barrel was less than a meter away, pointing straight at my heart. He told me that my disease was Christ and that there was no cure for it. Then, without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in that quiet valley. The bullet hit me square in the chest at point-blank range. I honestly believed that moment would be my last breath on earth. I was completely defenseless, powerless to fight back or protect myself. I placed my life entirely in God's hands. In that split second, I prayed that He would receive my spirit. But while I was still standing there, while I was still conscious and aware, I heard a voice. It was a female voice, clear and urgent, saying the same words 3 times. Run away. I don't know if it was an angel or if it was God Himself speaking to my spirit. But without thinking, without questioning, I started running. Immediately, all 5 of them began shooting at me. I heard the terrifying sound of bullets cutting through the air all around me. Some whizzed past my head. Others kicked up dirt at my feet. The sound was everywhere, echoing off the mountain walls. It was absolutely excruciating, knowing that any second another bullet could hit me and end my life. After running just a few meters, I felt an intense, burning pain explode in my left leg. My leg gave out underneath me and I collapsed to the ground, unable to move. Everything went black as I lost consciousness. When I finally woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. I was confused, disoriented, not sure how I had gotten there or how much time had passed. My head was foggy and my body felt heavy. Then I heard a doctor's voice nearby, talking to someone else. He was saying that I had been shot and that they needed to call the police immediately to report the incident. I panicked. If the police came and started investigating, they would discover I was in Jordan illegally. They would contact my family. They would send me back to Iraq where certain death awaited me. I immediately called out to the doctor and begged him not to contact anyone until after he had examined me thoroughly. I explained that if the injury wasn't life-threatening, I would prefer to leave and seek treatment somewhere else, somewhere I wouldn't be identified or registered. The doctor, perhaps seeing the desperation in my eyes, agreed to examine me first before making any calls. He carefully checked my entire body, looking for wounds. Then he gave me news that was both relieving and confusing. He said I had only been shot once, and the bullet had hit me in the left leg, in the muscle. There was no chest wound. Despite my uncle shooting me directly in the chest from less than a meter away, there was no injury there at all. I was overwhelmed with relief. I knew I could leave the hospital without needing major surgery. So I contacted a nun, a sister who had been helping care for Christians in hiding. She immediately sent a taxi to pick me up and bring me to a safe location. When I arrived at the house where I was staying, 3 doctors were already there waiting for me, arranged by the nun. They examined my leg carefully and confirmed that a bullet was indeed lodged inside. The doctor was able to identify where the bullet had entered my leg, but the strange thing was that there was no exit wound. The bullet had gone in but hadn't come out the other side. They tried contacting several hospitals to schedule surgery to remove the bullet, but every hospital refused to see me without an official police report of the shooting. They were afraid of getting involved in something criminal. We were stuck, not knowing what to do next. Then suddenly, without warning, blood began gushing from the side of my leg opposite from where the bullet had entered. It was pouring out like someone had opened a faucet. The doctor was completely confused, trying to trace the path the bullet had taken through my leg. He couldn't make sense of it. The trajectory didn't follow any logical pattern. Among the 3 doctors present was a Christian surgeon. He was particularly puzzled by the fact that the bullet hadn't traveled in a straight line, which is what normally happens when someone is shot. Bullets go straight through tissue, but mine hadn't. The next day, arrangements were secretly made to take me to a military hospital where this Christian surgeon worked. They were able to perform an X-ray on my leg without requiring a police report. When the X-ray results came back, even the surgeon was shocked. The bullet simply wasn't there anymore. It had completely disappeared. There was no metal fragment, no bullet, nothing showing up on the X-ray. The surgeon, absolutely amazed, explained something to me that still gives me chills. He said that based on the entry and exit wounds and the damage to my tissue, the bullet had torn through my bones, muscles, and tendons. But somehow, in a way that defied all medical explanation, the bullet hadn't actually damaged any of them permanently. The tissue that should have been destroyed was intact. The bones that should have been shattered were whole. And most incredibly, the bullet had zigzagged its way through my leg instead of traveling straight. He looked at me and said clearly that there was no human explanation for what had happened. It was medically impossible. The only explanation was divine intervention. God had protected me in a way that went beyond the laws of nature. After this miracle, my family and I began moving every single night, never staying in the same place twice. We were terrified that my relatives were still searching for me, that they might find out where I was staying and come to finish what they had started. We lived in constant fear, always looking over our shoulders, always ready to run. Shortly after these events, France agreed to grant us a visa. This was another miracle because getting refugee status and permission to enter a European country was extremely difficult, especially for Iraqis at that time. But God opened this door, and France welcomed us with open arms. It's where we live to this very day, though I still cannot reveal my exact location because the fatwa against me remains in effect. A fatwa has no expiration date. It's not like a legal warrant that expires after a certain number of years. It can be enforced at any time and in any place by any Muslim who feels called to carry it out. Even here in France, I must remain vigilant. I move frequently, I maintain anonymity, and I'm extremely careful about who knows my real name and where I live. Some time after our arrival in France, I began carefully trying to re-establish contact with my family members. It was risky, but I missed them terribly despite everything that had happened. I managed to talk to some of my brothers by phone, being very careful about what I said and never revealing my location. And now I want to tell you the most incredible part of this entire story, the part that proves beyond any doubt that God's power can transform even the hardest hearts. One of my brothers, one of the 5 men who shot at me in that valley, who tried to kill me for my faith, he converted to Christianity. Today he is baptized. He has put his faith in Jesus Christ. The man who once pulled a trigger trying to end my life is now my brother not just by blood but by faith. This testimony is living proof of God's supernatural protection and His power to change hearts that seem unchangeable. When I look back at everything that has happened, I feel nothing but overwhelming gratitude. God kept me alive through situations that should have killed me. He guided me through moments that seemed impossible to survive. He protected me not only physically but also spiritually, keeping my faith strong even in the darkest valleys. And above all, I thank the Lord for transforming my brother's heart. The fact that someone who participated in my attempted murder is now serving the same Jesus I serve is the most powerful evidence I could ever give of God's reality and His love. I want to make something absolutely clear before I finish. I do not hate Muslims. Many people assume that because I was persecuted, tortured, and shot by Muslims, I must harbor hatred toward them. But that's not the case at all. On the contrary, when I met Christ, my heart was filled with His love, and that love extends to everyone, including Muslims. I hold no resentment. I carry no bitterness. I love Muslims with all my heart, and it is precisely this love that motivates me to share my story. I want them to know the truth I discovered. I want them to experience the freedom and joy I found in Christ. When I speak out about the problems I saw in Islam, I'm not doing it to attack people. I'm doing it because I care about them and I want them to have the opportunity to seek truth just as I did. However, I must be honest about what I've experienced and what I've seen. Religion, when misinterpreted or distorted, can have devastating negative effects on people's lives and communities. This is true not just for Islam but for any belief system that values tradition and authority over truth and compassion. Therefore, I make an appeal to everyone, especially to my Muslim brothers and sisters. Read the Quran sincerely and seek to truly understand it. Don't just accept what you're told by others. Don't rely solely on the interpretations of scholars or imams. Seek the truth with an open heart, without intermediaries standing between you and God. Today, with so much information accessible through books and the internet, it's possible to research and learn with greater clarity and discernment than ever before. Reflect deeply. Ask difficult questions. Don't accept everything simply because of family pressure or cultural expectations. God gave you a mind and He wants you to use it to seek truth. And the last thing I want to say to both Christians and Muslims is this simple but profound truth. God is love. Pure, perfect, unconditional love. And love itself is God. This is the most powerful and deepest truth we can hold in our hearts.